So got a written statement here. I'm sure many other people do. So begins with honorable councillors. Appreciate the time very much. Name's Alan Miracle, originally from Tulsa, graduate of Booker T, class of 96. Lived in 4 different countries, been a registered independent for many years. And I'm coming before you, like my sister Tammy just now, to call attention to a problem in our city whose gravity is matched only by the intensity of the neglect of that problem so far. First, I'd like to recount a brief and lesser-known narrative from the history of our nation. Joshua Glover was a fugitive slave from St. Louis, Missouri, who sought asylum in Wisconsin in 1852. 2 years later, his owner located him and attempted to use the Fugitive Slave Act to recover him, and by, quote, recover him, unquote. We need to understand that the owner sent armed men to kidnap him and forcibly drag him back to slavery in chains, because it was legal. Glover was captured, taken to a Milwaukee jail, and then a mob, incited by an abolitionist named Sherman Booth, broke into the jail, rescued Glover, the fugitive slave, who then escaped to Canada via the Underground Railroad. Now, the federal government then tried to prosecute Booth, the abolitionist, who I remind you was the abolitionist who incited the jailbreak and the final escape of the fugitive slave. Then, over the course of time, courts in Wisconsin stepped up to defy the U.S. Supreme Court. They pronounced the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional, a bad law, because it was, as we recognize now. The lower court of lesser jurisdiction and authority ignored and defied the U.S. Supreme Court because the U.S. Supreme Court was wrong. The Supreme Court had called for criminal sanctions against someone who incited a mob to break into a prison, which is kind of crazy, to physically oppose federal marshals, who were the kidnappers, and rescue an escaped slave. But lower-level magistrates in Wisconsin pushed back because they knew they had it right and the Supreme Court had it wrong. A better-known historical example I'd like to mention is 1857's Dred Scott decision, during which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott, being a black man and therefore subhuman, had no standing to bring a lawsuit against a white man. The Supreme Court's decision instituted racism as the official policy of the federal government. The Supreme Court was wrong then, too. Dead wrong in a very serious way that led to the destruction of thousands and thousands of innocent lives. Moving forward a bit, the Roe v. Wade decision of 1973 is even more in error than the Dred Scott decision was. It is based on worse logic, worse science, worse constitutional footing, and worse ethical foundations, even then pronouncing a black man to be more like a household appliance than a human being. The Supreme Court has succeeded in convincing everyone that it has authority to tell everyone else that we should allow for the dehumanization and destruction of not black people, but tiny people in our communities. And a facility whose sole purpose is chopping babies into little pieces or poisoning them to death with chemical weaponry stands in our city at 6136 East 32nd Place, the address mentioned earlier. It goes by the name of Tulsa Women's Clinic. Women go in there and they pay more than $500 to an elderly man to view them naked from the waist down and to insert his surgical tools inside their most intimate body parts to destroy their little child. Approximately 25 lives are lost every week in this way in our city. And we sit back and we call it choice. But it's the wrong choice, and it isn't her body. If it were her body, she would be the one who dies, not that I'm wishing that upon her. It's the baby who dies. It's his body or her body. Now, it takes us to you. You as city councillors have the obligation before Almighty God and before the citizens of Tulsa to uphold your oaths to the Constitution. You said you would play a role in protecting Tulsans from loss of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. And I ask, what law have these tiny children broken that we approve of their summary execution? None, obviously. We just don't care, and I include myself in that for a long time. And so I'm here to plead with you and to call upon each of you to honor your oaths and do everything in your power to enforce the Constitution in the city of Tulsa and to defy anyone who might tell you that you lack the authority to do what is right. I'm asking you to enforce the law against murder that is already on the books. And I'm asking you, please, because these tiny babies, they've done nothing wrong. They ask nothing of us except our love and compassion. We must stop the destruction of these precious lives. Who knows how many geniuses, wonderfully loving people we've lost? No one knows. And so for the sake of those whose voice has been violently taken away, I raise mine. This is the Holocaust of our day, and I beg you, thank you, I'm almost done. I beg you to use every means at your disposal to bring about the criminalization of the murder of children within Tulsa city limits, and to do it today, because beautiful tiny humans are scheduled to be destroyed tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Item number 12. Sir, I just want to ask the same question I asked my friend. So, are you looking for us to adopt an ordinance against that practice, or what is it that your ideal outcome for the city?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I believe that within this, U.S. city councilors have a certain amount of influence and authority to call upon, for example, the police department to enforce the law against murder and to apply it to everybody, notwithstanding the Supreme Court who says that it doesn't apply to a certain class of people.
So the expectation would be that we would have people arrested for performing that procedure?
If they should do so once it were known that it were illegal within the city of Tulsa, I believe that you should shut down the surgical abortion facility for sure. Call and instruct the police department to enforce the law against murder there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.